Ibrahim.
So my question is more of a question of advice rather than an actual question.
Right.
Recently, I've met an actually convert Muslim, an Irish Muslim,
Right.
who converted to Sufism.
Right.
And I've listened to your tapes on
On Sufism.
the Shias
That's right.
and the Sunnis, but I'm looking for advice on how to open a dialogue with a
You
Sufi.
see, the Sufism, as I have dealt with, is genuine and also fake, and also, in fact, planted Sufism. I have spoken at length on this subject during my various addresses and question answer sessions. The most important thing about Sufism is that apparently it began with India from a musician family of Anayat Ullah or Anayat something, and some others who then traveled west, impressing the West with their brand of Sufism, which was helped with music, by music, which was a good instrument to impress the Western mind of that period, until that family of Sufis got settled in America, married into Americans. And from then on, Sufism was totally taken over by the Americans. And from then on, during the First World War, as well as during the Second World War, Sufis played a very pivotal role in spying against the Nazis and other German forces. And so that those Sufi women who played that role, they have become national heroes. Offhand, I don't remember their name, but that will come. They are given some pseudo-names, but in the British society, if I take that name, you will understand what I'm talking about. What was it? Mahatra something or... Anyway.
Matahari?
Matahari, that's right. Matahari, and similarly, some other characters. They were the daughters of these Sufis. And then Sufism got so close to some European cabinets that in Holland there were one or two Sufi ministers. And then again, strangely, it was also very closely related to Judaism. And American Sufism tried to cultivate the same brand of Sufism into Russia. An attempt was made before the turn of this century to send this Sufi group from America, these musicians, at the time of the Tsars, to go there. It was, I think, the period of Rasputin being at its height. And they approached Moscow and attempted to seek permission to go to the countryside and hold Sufi conferences here and there. But they were very sternly rejected by the Tsarist regime because they knew the game. I mean, they had played the same game, of course. So it was nothing new to them. And they said, go back, nothing of Sufism here. Why? Because they wanted to implant a Sufi sect in Russia whereby they could spy on Russian system of government even before communism, became the government theory. Before that, I'm talking of those days. But the Russians were afraid of Sufism because their brand of Sufism was so different from the one American brand which was being introduced, because it was a militant Sufism. Nowhere else in the world you find Sufism so closely related to militant theories and attitudes as was in Russia. In fact, that Sufism was largely responsible for various rebellious attempts on the part of some Muslim states against the Tsarist rule, and an attempt was made repeatedly to emancipate them from the Tsarist rule, to liberate them from the Tsarist rule. And they were all led by Sufi movements. So they were already very allergic to Sufi, the word Sufi, when they reached and tried to spread this Sufism. And you see most books written on Western brand of Sufism, by American authors. They have become so interested in Islamic Sufism, and only that Sufism which we are talking about, of whose the leadership of that Sufism is entirely taken over by the Americans or by some Westerns. There is not a single Oriental Muslim at the helm of Sufi affairs, that Sufism you were talking about.
That's right, because the leader of the Sufism in this country is actually Scottish.
You just again?
He's Scottish. I don't know his name, but apparently he's
I know, I've seen him on television. And that is why his introduction of Islam as he does it is so jarring. And sometimes one is shocked to see if this is how Islam and Sufism are introduced in the West, what would be the reaction? That may be one of the reasons why Sufism of this brand is supported and popularized, attempted to be popularized. So many innocent people follow such movements without knowing what they are bargaining for. And they are just fed up of the values they have inherited. It is not the love of something which attracts them, but it is the repulsion against something which pushes them apart and to something, in search of something. And that is why they think that Sufism is related with pacifism. Mm-hmm. And they don't want to indulge in any Islam which has militant views and this and that. So they are naturally drawn towards that brand of Sufism. But to no avail, because it does not have the same Islamic principles governing them. And if it does, they are in some respects even more rigid than the ordinary Muslims belonging to the mainstream Islam. But they employ music freely, they employ tactics of various sorts, which the leader you mentioned also does very freely. And somehow I think consciously or unconsciously they are playing into hands. Mm-hmm. Allah knows best.